Hello there. I'm Koios, the Rōnin BeatMaker. And welcome to Lounge Rōnin. All things, everything. And if you are new to the channel, please make sure to hit that like button. Hello there. Make sure to hit that like button and ring that notification bell. And share with any like-minded viewers. And please, make sure to leave a comment with your thoughts below. And a little dash of constructive criticism, as that will help me and the channel grow. And on this episode, we are going to discuss Queen Sheba, the mother of Ethiopia. And without further ado, let's get into it. I should preface that this will be part of a series of videos covering various individuals of that time period and of that area. So strap yourselves in and enjoy some cool information. And remember, everybody, to do your own personal research into the information that I provide with you today, as we are just doing a little light introduction into a historical figure as known as Queen Sheba. So without further ado, and enough rambling, Rōnin rants, let us get into it. This article was written January 2020, and it was updated January 17th, 2020. The Queen of Sheba, how a legend was born. The Queen of Sheba is an enigmatic figure found in all three of the Abrahamic faiths, i.e. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. In addition to her presence in these three religions, the Queen of Sheba plays an important role in the history and identity of the Ethiopian people. Hold on, guys, a little bit of a technical difficulty. Hold on, guys. Let me just take care of this little technical issue real quick. Alrighty, sorry about that. Okay, here we go. While most people regard the Queen of Sheba to be a legendary figure, she is considered by the Ethiopians to have existed and is revered as the mother of their nation. Moreover, she is believed to have been the founder of the Solomonic dynasty, which ruled over Ethiopia until its last ruler, Haile Selassie I, was deposed in 1974. The Queen of Sheba is mentioned in both the Hebrew Bible and the Quran. In both these religious texts, she is never mentioned by name. Nevertheless, the different traditions have given her different names. For instance, Arab sources refer to the Queen of Sheba as Balaquis or Beliquis, while a Christian source, De Melibrios Clares or Del Clares Melibrios, meaning concerning famous women, written by the 14th century Florentine author Giovanni Barcucci, refers to the legendary queen as Nicula. As the Ethiopians, they refer to the Queen of Sheba as Makeda. This name is found in the Kibra Nagas, meaning the glory of kings, which was written in the 14th century and considered to be Ethiopia's national epic. The Queen of Sheba in the Hebrew Bible. In the Hebrew Bible, the story about the Queen of Sheba is found in 1 Kings 10, 1-13, and 2 Chronicles 9, 1-12. Though both accounts say more or less the same thing, in both of these accounts, the Queen of Sheba visited Solomon in Jerusalem, as she had heard of the fame of the Solomon concerning the name of the Lord, and wanted to prove him with hard questions. For her visit to Jerusalem, the Queen of Sheba brought with her a very great train, with camels that bear spices and very much gold and precious stones. The account then states that the Queen of Sheba asked Solomon the questions that she had said. The king was able to answer all of them. The queen was overwhelmed by Solomon's wisdom as well as the wealth of his kingdom. And when the Queen of Sheba had seen all Solomon's wisdom and the house that he had built, and the meat of his table, and the sitting of his servants, and the attendance of his ministers, and their apparel, and his cupbearers, and his ascent by which he went up unto the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her. Here we have a Western interpretation of the Queen of Sheba. Let's keep in mind that Ethiopia is in Africa. And as I've been learning recently, listening to some lectures by Michael Inhotep, the way he kind of describes this translation from taking a lot of African historical figures and influences throughout Europe and essentially whitewashing them. This is one example of it. It's kind of like reverse DEI of the modern day. But here we have an illustration of her with King Solomon and presenting a gift. Needless to say, the presence of the Queen of Sheba in the Hebrew Bible is meant to show off Solomon's wisdom, the wealth of his kingdom, and to glorify God. At the same time, the account provides us with a tantalizing glimpse of the wealth possessed by the Queen of Sheba. Quote, as she gave the king 120 talents, about 4 tons, of gold and of spices, very great store, and precious stones, there came no more such abundance of spices as these which the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon, and the navy also of Hiram, that brought gold from Orph, brought in from Orph great plenty along trees and precious stones. 1 Kings 10:10, New International Version Bible. Solomon likewise treated the queen with great generosity during her stay in Jerusalem. And King Solomon gave unto the queen of Sheba all her desire, whatsoever she asked, besides that which Solomon gave her of his royal bounty. After that, the queen of Sheba returned to her own country, and does not reappear in the Hebrew Bible. It may be mentioned that this legendary queen makes a cameo in the New Testament. In Matthew 12:42, Jesus rebukes the scribes and Pharisees who were asking him to sign by, saying, "The queen of the south shall rise in the judgment with this generation and shall condemn it. For she came from the uttermost parts of the earth to her to hear the wisdom of Solomon. And behold, a greater than Solomon is here." The queen of the south is equated with the queen of Sheba. In addition, this Old Testament story is recast in a new light by Christians. For instance, the Queen of Sheba visits to Solomon is seen as a metaphor for the submission of the Gentiles to Christ. In addition, the queen is said to foreshadow the Virgin Mary through her chastity, and her gifts of gold, spices, and stone are said to mirror the gold, frankincense, and myrrh presented by the Magi to the infant Jesus. The Queen of Sheba in the Quran. Okay. The Queen of Sheba in the Quran. The account of the Queen of Sheba is found also in the Quran, and is quite similar to the one in the Hebrew Bible. In Stuart on Namai, the story of the Queen of Sheba begins with a bird known as Hoopoe, who brought news to Solomon about the land of Sheba. The Hoopoe reported that this land was governed by a woman who has been given of all things, and she has a great throne. In addition, the Hoopoe found that the queen and her subjects were prostrating to the sun instead of Allah, and Satan has made their deeds pleasing to them and averted them from his way, so they are not guided, and say they do not prostrate to Allah. Hearing this report, Solomon commanded the Hoopoe to deliver a letter to the Queen of Sheba, in which the queen is invited to submit to Allah. Now, they say prostrating to the sun, that's Saturn worship. So, for those out there who are into the occult and what have you, you'll know what that's all about. But let's continue. Here we have an illustration of Belliquis reclining in a garden, the Queen of Sheba facing the Hopi, Solomon's messenger. So here we have the queen laying down, and the Hopi bird on the far right on top of this twig stump. The queen consulted her advisors on the reply that she should send to Solomon, and they respond by saying, "We are men of strength and of great military might, but the command is yours, so see what you will command." Although the queen was aware of her kingdom's military might, she opted for a more diplomatic approach. Indeed, kings, when they enter a city, they ruin it and render the honored of its people humbled. And thus do they, but indeed I will send to them a gift and see what reply the messengers will return. The gifts sent by Queen of Sheba to Jerusalem were rejected by Solomon, who said, "Do you provide with me wealth? But what Allah has given me is better than what he has given you. Rather, it is you who rejoice in your gift." In addition, the king threatened to take military action if the queen still did not submit. "Return to them, for we will surely come to them with soldiers that they will be powerless to encounter, and we will surely expel them therefrom in humiliation, and they will be debased." Therefore, the Queen of Sheba decided to travel to Jerusalem. Prior to her arrival, however, Solomon assembled his jinn. A jinn is a genie. That is the original pronunciation of a genie, is a jinn. Had one of them bring the Queen of Sheba's throne back to his palace and had it disguised. This was done as to see if the queen was able to recognize her own throne. Here we have an illustration. The Queen of Sheba departs her land with many gifts for King Solomon. After that, the Queen of Sheba was invited into the palatial hall, and mistakenly the glass floor for the water lifted her skirt in order to avoid wetting her clothes. Finally, the Queen of Sheba admitted her mistake and submitted to Allah. Embellishments about the Queen of Sheba. Now, before we get into that, her submitting to Allah is essentially her submitting to God as opposed to worshiping Satan. Embellishments about the Queen of Sheba. The narratives about the Queen of Sheba in both the Hebrew Bible and the Quran have some gaps in them, and commentaries and religious scholars in later times have attempted to fill them. As a result, the stories surrounding the Queen of Sheba were embellished and became even more colorful than they already were. An embellishment of this story states that Solomon's jinns were afraid that the king would be tempted to marry the queen, and one of them whispered to Solomon that the queen had hairy legs and hooves of an ass. Solomon, being curious, ordered a glass floor to be built before his throne. So this was the early days of cock blocking. When the queen lifted her skirt to cross the water, it was revealed that she did have hairy legs. Solomon ordered his jinns to create a depilatory for the queen. The story ends without concluding if Solomon married the Queen of Sheba. See, ladies, that's why you gotta shave your legs. You just might lose out on a king. Amen, Pablo. Here we have an illustration of many embellishments, such as the glass floor story, have been written about the Queen of Sheba. Remember, ladies, shave your legs, get a king. In the Hebrew Bible, the Queen of Sheba is said to have tested Solomon with riddles, but these riddles are not found in the text itself. These riddles, however, can be found in the Midrash, a compilation of writings involving the critical explanation interpretation of the Hebrew Bible by ancient Jewish authorities. In the Midrashic account, the Queen of Sheba's first riddle is as follows: "How can a woman say to her son, 'Your father is my father, your grandfather my husband, you are my son, and I am your sister?'" Solomon's answer to the riddle was 2 daughters of Lut, who got their father drunk, had sex with him, got pregnant as a result, and bore sons. All right. Well, that's a kinky riddle. Next, the Queen of Sheba brought a group of children before Solomon. They were all of the same height and wore the same attire. The queen told Solomon to disguise between the boys and girls. The king had nuts and roasted ears of corn scattered before the children. The boys who were not bashful collected them and tied them within the hems of their garment, while the girls who were bashful tied them within their outer garments, since their bodies would be revealed if they had done as the boys did. This is getting a little weird, I'm not going to lie. Lastly, the queen brought a group of men before Solomon and asked him to disguise between the circumcised and the uncircumcised. Jesus Christ. Solomon had the Ark of the Covenant brought out and opened the Hold on. Solomon had the Ark of the Covenant. This is getting very, very wild. Solomon had the Ark of the Covenant brought out and opened, and the circumcised stood or bowed their bodies to half their weight, while their contestants were filled with the radiance of the Shekinah, whereas the uncircumcised fell prostrate on the ground. Okay, that's that. This is getting into that whole I don't even know what is going on here. They lost me at the competition between the circumcised and uncircumcised, which is kind of ironic because I know that it's really mostly like a Jewish thing to do circumcisions, and I know it kind of got popularized within regular mainstream Western society, but it's not something that's practiced anywhere else in the world that I know of. But please correct me down in the comments. But yeah, this is all I gotta say is Queen Sheba, she is a wild woman. That's all I gotta say. That's all I gotta say about this one. A wild woman with hairy legs. I've had my fair share of those. Anyways, let's continue. The most significant embellishment of the story, however, is found in the Kebra Nagas. In this text, the Queen of Sheba is called Makeda and is said to have stayed in Jerusalem for 6 months, where she learned from Solomon. On the last night of her stay, she was tricked by the king into having sex with him. According to the tale, Solomon had invited the queen to a banquet during which spicy food to induce her thirst was served. So this is like giving them that sexy chocolate. I hear that they have this chocolate that like gets you horny. So he pretty much just lathered her up. Wow. For such wisdom. The boy sure does love spiking. Okay. Just be careful of the religions you practice. You might be surprised at how kinky they might just be. All right. And here we have an illustration of the story. There is a story that King Solomon tricked the Queen of Sheba into spending the night with him. There he is showing off some little inner thigh on the right leg, some dance moves, just spiked her food, getting her nice and wet. For real, Pops. This is getting unethical, I'm not gonna lie. Let's continue. After the banquet, the queen, the king invited her to stay in his palace for the night. Oh. The queen agreed on the condition that he would not take her by force. Solomon agreed to that on the condition that the queen would not take anything from him by force. Oh, Lord. The wicked games we weave and play. Makita, though slightly offended, agreed. In the middle of the night, Makita woke up as she was very thirsty and reached for a jar of water close to her bed. Solomon appeared, warning the queen that if she drank the water, she would be breaking her oath. Oh, man. You gotta, these. Let me see. How many minutes are we into this? Ladies, you gotta be careful of these F boys, man. They be playing all sorts of shady games. Makita's thirst, however, was too strong, and she drank the water, thus freeing Solomon from his oath. The two ended up spending the night together. Makita became pregnant, and when she returned to her kingdom, gave birth to a son, Menelik, who became the first emperor of Ethiopia. For such a wise man, he's a deadbeat dad. so, so, so like, so is this safe to say that she is the first single mother of antiquity in terms of historical history? Oh, vey. Man. All right, let's continue. Where was the Queen of Sheba from? Lastly, arguably, the greatest mystery surrounding the story of the Queen of Sheba is the location of Sheba itself. In the Kibra Nagas, the Queen of Sheba is said to be from Ethiopia. The identification of Ethiopia as Sheba is supported by the 1st century AD Jewish historian Josephus, who identified the Queen of Sheba as the Queen of Egypt and Ethiopia. Here's an illustration, or I should say a painting of a 17th century AD painting of the Queen of Sheba from the church of Lalibela, Ethiopia. She definitely does look Ethiopian. That is no mistaking that. One view held by modern scholars today is that the Queen of Sheba came from Aksum, an ancient kingdom in Ethiopia. An alternative suggestion is that the Hebrew word Sheba is derived from the Arabic Saba, an ancient kingdom located in the southwestern corner of the Arabian Peninsula, in what is today Yemen. Although the archaeological evidence showed that there was indeed a civilization thriving in that region, the artifacts were dated to the 17th century BC, about 300 years after Solomon's reign. During the 1980s, however, new discoveries showed that Theban civilization was already in existence during the 10th century, making it not impossible that a queen from there could have visited Solomon in Jerusalem. In any case, conclusive answers have yet to be found, and the question about the location of Sheba is still at present left open. Alrighty. And there we have a light introduction into the Queen of Sheba. One thing that I've been really enjoying about doing a lot of these little light introductions into various historical figures, whether they're a bit of a myth to them or not. One thing that's really fun about it is really kind of pointing out these really interesting characters to know, especially when it comes to female historical figures. which, we don't necessarily give them a lot of praise. Uh, and that's kind of one thing that I find really interesting is that despite the fact that we praise a lot of male historical figures, which, makes sense because of the accomplishments they have made, which I'm not downplaying. We obviously know that. Um, but I just find it really funny when we have these like little nuggets of really fascinating um, female historical figures that really, in many ways, have contributed a lot greatly to shaping the past and our understanding of it. Like, for one instance, and I covered her recently, is the Princess Anna Komnene from Italy, or not from Italy, from the Byzantine Empire. I cannot remember where exactly that is located, but she was one of the first female historians, and she essentially documented much of the history of the Byzantine Empire that she was from, and really providing cited sources as well. Now, I don't know if there is any other historian prior to her who cited their sources, but that was one thing that made her stand out was the fact that she cited a lot of her sources for her historical book regarding her family and their legacy. So I think that's someone that's really fascinating and should get more spotlight. It's kind of funny, right? When they kind of complain, the 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 left, they kind of complain. The feminists, they complain about them not doing a lot of representation of female historical figures and what have you. And instead of actually taking time and delving into, you know, their own cultural past and the female historical figures there, what they're doing instead when it comes to like European historical figures is, they're essentially taking like Anne Bonnet or, very famous queens and if his, historical figures in Europe and making them black. Now, when when in fact that a lot of them historically have been looked at as white. There are paintings of them. We know that they were white historical figures, but due to the the communistic mindset that's going on in the entertainment world, it is not allowing for historical figures like Queen Sheba or Anne Comey to get their own films or TV shows. These are really important figures. Why cannot, especially Anne Comey, it could be a small little short film or what have you, but to have a film that sheds spotlight on, the world's or Europe's first female historian, I would say that's a pretty important historical thing to talk about and to show the world. And it would be great for young women to see these kind of historical figures instead of them, you know, whitewashing and replacing original historical figures with black actors, Asian actors, Middle Eastern actors. They were doing that back in the day. A lot of that was due to the fact that they didn't have a lot of Asian actors or black actors to work in those industries. You could, whether it's in Europe or what have you. So they were limited, and so they kind of had to embellish and have white actors wear yellow face and whatnot. And I'm not trying to downplay some of the racial issues about it, but at the same time, you kind of have to look at the reality of the situation. And that's kind of one thing that I mean about when we're talking about these kind of female historical figures is kind of the hypocrisy that I kind of see going on a lot in those movements where they talk about wanting representation, but their form of representation is erasing the established historical accurate representation of figures that they deem offensive because of the color of their skin, which, as you know, is asinine and crazy and disgusting. Imagine a TV show about the gladiatrix of ancient Rome, which were the female gladiators. And a lot of them were high society women that were just bored and just wanted to F shit up. So they went around fighting each other to the death. How incredible would that be to see an awesome show about these women, these high society women that decided to become gladiators for fun? I mean, that would be an amazing uh, show to see. And you can even tie into it Emperor Nero, who was the guy who first allowed this to become public for the regular citizens of Rome to participate in witnessing. So, these are, I'm just only bringing up these small little nuggets of uh, famous historical um, events that, include women, that, are about women that, we could actually put onto the big screens, that are not found in the basis of, erasing history to create a new type of history that's really based on, I would say, more of a like a Marxist ideological viewpoint. You look at many Marxist nations. You look at the Color Revolution in China, where they essentially erased their own history, and you see that going on a lot here in Western society, where they'll take their own history and erase it and replace it with racially inaccurate historical representations, just on the basis of doing it because we need to represent history in its true form, which is just completely asinine and frustrating for someone like me who would actually like to see, proper historical representations of shows. They cry so much about not showing, Europe with, black people in it. Then make a show about the times that Europe was filled with the Moors. I know there are people out there that like to argue about it and say that's not true, but there is a book that many people can look up and read, and I will pull it up for you right now. I have it in my, here it is. I have it in my wish list, and it's called Black Star: The Presence of the African Presence in Early Europe. Now, I was listening to a lecture from Michael Imhotep, and he was literally showing pages from the book, and it's showing, the Black Madonna. It's showing Mary as black and Jesus as black, and these are statues that are all over Europe. They're not torn down or anything like that. And so people kind of want to, elude and kind of pretend as if that's not true, when there is plenty of historical implications of this. It's no different than the Scottish people tracing their lineage all the way back to an Egyptian princess and queen called Senu, which I did a live stream on, if that's something that you're interested in. But the reason why I kind of bring this up for everyone in wrapping up right now is that, like, when it comes to a lot of these historical figures of antiquity and of ancient times, you really have to avoid, unfortunately I'm gonna have to say this, but you have to avoid Western sources, and really look for sources that are actually people who are of that region, who can actually properly trace that time period. And they're hard to find, but they're out there if you're willing to put in that work and look for them. And that's essentially what I'm kind of saying, is like, you really got to be careful when it comes to the Europeification of history, because a lot of it really isn't accurate. A lot of it is lies and obfuscation. So, in order to, and just wrapping everything up here, we really got to take time, for all of us out there, and really do your own research into the history of the world, because you will be surprised at the things that you will uncover yourself, and more about yourself as well. You might realize that stay positive, stay focused, stay true, and much love.